Today, the CDC and FDA announced that they are calling a pause on the administration of the J&J vaccine for COVID-19 due to a small number of adverse events. It was seen in 6 out of the 6.85 million people who've been vaccinated, and out of an abundance of caution, they've called a pause on the administration. There are a couple of reasons to do that. The first is to investigate this a bit further, and the second is to alert the clinicians out there when someone comes in with these types of symptoms to ask them if they have a history of a recent vaccination. The people who've already gotten the vaccine should not be worried because, as I mentioned, this is a very rare event, 1 in more than 1 million individuals. The J&J vaccine has been shown in clinical trials to be highly efficacious. What we're talking about now has nothing to do with the efficacy of the vaccine. The federal government is working with the distributors of this vaccine to see if we can expedite getting appointments to get an alternative vaccine, namely either the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine. Over 120 million people have received at least 1 dose of the vaccines. Out of that 120 million, only a small proportion, 6.85 million, are J&J. All the rest are either Moderna and Pfizer. There have been no signals that there's any concern about adverse events among those tens of millions of people. Absolutely, you should get vaccinated. The danger of COVID-19 as a disease clearly, overwhelmingly outstrips any risk of an adverse event from a vaccine. What I'd like to do is just spend a minute or so just adding one aspect of this discussion that we have been questioned on fairly intensively over the last 24 hours, and that is the issue of whether or not this action on the part of the CDC and the FDA will actually make the issue of vaccine hesitancy even a more difficult problem as people see what's going on here, and then they essentially extrapolate that to the issue of hesitancy, not only for this vaccine, but for all the vaccines that are available. To underscore what Dr. Walensky said, this was done in an abundance of caution to be able to take a look at the issues that Dr. Walensky delineated. Importantly, when I go out and try to counter the issues of hesitancy, a substantial proportion of the hesitancy is centered around concern that the vaccines might not be safe. I've addressed this many times on this briefing. For example, the question, you did this so quickly in 11 months. It usually takes years. Is there a real problem here? Did you cut corners and did you not pay enough attention to safety? The fact that following the EUA, we have continued to follow very carefully any possibility of adverse events, I believe, is the other side of the coin of hesitancy. It should reinforce in those individuals how we take safety so seriously. So as opposed to looking this as a negative safety issue, it could be looked at as a positive issue where they know that when we let a vaccine be available and give it a go-ahead to be put into the arms of the American people, we do it with a considerable degree of confidence as to its safety. So when I get asked questions about whether or not this has set us back from a hesitancy standpoint, I give the opposite of it, namely what I've just explained. So with